Well, this takes us on now to our panel discussion, and I get to invite back to the board Crystal Moran, the Senior Cybersecurity Strategist from SysDig, Ron Eddings, the CEO from Hacker Valley Media, and Dick Lake, our first speaker of the day and the Senior Product Manager for Microsoft. So welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the rest of the talks today. I'll give you a couple of minutes to sort of reintroduce yourself, just in case anybody missed the sessions this morning. And then we'll jump straight into some questions that have been posed as part of this amazing day and the insight into what's happening in cybersecurity in the cloud at the moment. So I'll go with Crystal first. You are the first on my list. I don't know if the order is the same on everybody's screen, but you're there.
All right, Crystal Moran, cybersecurity strategist at SysDig, former military background, threat intelligence linguist. So I do all things cloud security, intel, APTs, love tracking bad guys and figuring out what they're doing. And yeah, that's about it. And earlier I presented on SysDig's annual usage report. So all kinds of fun data about how organizations are using the cloud.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Yep.
Dick, on to you next.
Yeah, so Dick Lake, I'm one of the product managers on the Defender for Cloud team. I focus a lot on the posture management side and some of our new AI services, the threat protections that we have there. Been here about 10 years, done red team stuff, done blue team stuff. Just, yeah, it's been fun.
Excellent. I hope you've got a long way to go as well, yes. And Ron.
Yeah, hey everyone, Ron Eddings here, host, CEO of Hacker Valley Media. Spent the first half of my career focusing on offensive ops, defensive ops, enterprise security, working as a vendor. I've done a lot. Second half of my career is going towards speaking to people like you all in the audience and also Gen AI research. So excited to get into it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. It's great to have all of you here this afternoon. So we've heard throughout the day that organizations are really facing some difficulties with utilizing or adopting cloud strategies, cloud being probably one of the #1 agendas for organizations who haven't yet adopted. I know I work with 3 companies at the moment who have absolutely zero infrastructure in the public cloud, but in the next 5 years, that's going to change. They're probably going to be over 50%. The introduction, the expense of hardware, energy, etc., is just making it more and more difficult for organizations to stay out of the cloud. And yet there are so many decisions to make when it comes to cloud utilization and the strategies associated with it. And then just to add into the mix of this, we're going to throw in some AI and generative technologies that everybody's talking about and has been for the past, 12, 18 months or so. And this always it always takes me back to, I remember when VMware first arrived on the market and everyone said, oh, virtualization is going to solve all of the problems. And it solved many issues, but raised other ones as well. And then it was, what was it after that? Blockchain. Blockchain was going to solve all of the we can see where that went. And then it was Docker, so it was reducing the footprints of operating systems and using containerization services. Now we've got AI. So let's start on this as a subject, because I think this is going to be the focus of our discussion for the rest of this session. So what recent security trends are affecting organizations, and particularly focusing on organizations who are either recently or in an early adoption stage into cloud security strategy, and how does AI affect that? I'm going to go with Ron first, because I know you've been dead excited to talk about AI all day. Go for it.
AI changes everything. When I first got started, I actually have a picture of Kobe Bryant behind me because he is someone that gave extreme dedication to the fundamentals. AI changes everything because you can learn the fundamentals through books, videos, like you did the old-fashioned way, or you could do it with a combination of AI. I've seen a lot of advancement in the world of technology as a whole, from producing better code, getting feedback on your code, especially for this topic of cloud security. It's one of the areas that I lean heavily on for myself. I'm a cybersecurity practitioner, not necessarily an expert developer. So I still want to develop code though. Gen AI has helped me a lot. And I think that the more context that we're able to give it, especially the context on our experience and our organization, the better that's going to be at giving you strategy, code, advice, even summarization for meetings. There's a lot of people that have these AI bots in their meetings for transcription. I think that's exceptional. When you combine AI on top of all of that, it gives you really insightful information that's very specific to you or your entire team.
Agreed. Rely heavily on AI to help me code anything. But then I always go back and check it as well, because it does have a tendency to make things up every now and again. What do you think, Crystal?
I'm going to go with speed. So I actually had this question earlier following my presentation. So as you're transitioning from on-prem or different environments to cloud, there's this factor of speed that for attackers and for you. In on-prem environments, we used to see attacks taking days or months because there's this big weird curtain, and it would take attackers a long time to figure out what the heck was going on behind that curtain once they got into your environment, because they had no idea what was back there, right? They'd figure it out once they got in there. We get to the cloud, you can go on the internet and figure out a lot about an AWS or an Azure environment before you ever step foot into one. So now we're talking about attacks that happen in hours or minutes. So I think that is in trend that we're seeing that's very different for folks that are transitioning into cloud security. It's a big shock if you're new to the cloud, and it's something that's really hard and difficult to deal with. When you're realizing that you have 10 minutes to turn around and deal with an attack before you're breached, and now you have to go to your board and say, we have a $5 million breach that we're going to have to deal with. That's not fun. 10 minutes is not a lot of time to have to respond to some kind of incident when you used to have a month to find an attacker and shut them down. So yeah.
That's a really interesting perspective, and yeah, and horrifying in the same way.
I mean,
what about you?
like
What do you think, Dick?
So I like the point of speed, but almost taking it in a different direction. So when you were in your on-prem world, if you're just starting to move to the cloud, or if you're thinking back a couple years, like, there was time to work out things. Like, okay, I'm going to set up this service, and so I need X number of servers and routers and switches and all that stuff. There's the procurement time to get those. And while you're doing that, there's a bunch of business planning and operations, like, how are we going to operationalize this? How are we going to bring this into the security fold? With cloud, I can spin up 1,000 servers in a minute. I can do all of these things, wickedly fast, and more little, I call them nerd knobs, keep coming out. So, for example, uh, storage accounts, they've been out for a while here in Azure. Well, they first just used to have Microsoft key encryption. Okay, well, now we got customer managed key encryption, and everything just changes. And you, as the kind of centralized security team, are oftentimes like behind the curve, like, okay, how do I keep up with this? And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that people moving to the cloud have to face. And so my suggestion is, take it at your pace. Don't let the sales rep push you. Work through these things, have a plan before you start consuming the service. And I say that, for all the clouds.
You mentioned that too, right? Like going from 0 to 1,000.
Yeah.
It's that expedition of the attack surface too.
Yeah.
How quickly you can scale up in the cloud.
Right.
On-prem, you know exactly how many entry and exit points there are, and you're manually adding those entry points, and you know where an attacker can come in. It's so much easier in a cloud environment to add entry and exit points, and you add a new employee, to your organization, well, and now that employee is another identity, and now that's another entry point for an attacker. So just the expanse of a cloud environment just grows that attack surface tremendously too.
And then I think there's also the issue of like lack of knowledge on a certain, say, resource provider. So I know I'm at Microsoft, but I know Linux OS really well. But I am an absolute idiot when it comes to all things container workloads. And so this breadth of options that can be deployed makes it really hard for, a security person to be able to grok and understand the interesting nuances of like this thing's security and then trying to apply it to all of these little buckets.
I always, whenever I'm teaching one of the more introductory classes for SANS, I always describe the cloud as like a brand new box of Technics Lego. It's just that halfway through the build process, new parts are introduced, and the documentation doesn't always follow. And so you end up with some weird mechanical machine that doesn't quite do the thing that it was originally designed to do, or can be manipulated in other ways. And it's often we get that point across. AI has really introduced like an extra dimension to that entire series of puzzles by introducing capability that allows you to do things like decision making through processes, or introducing you to potentially new technologies that you weren't aware of. And I think that adding to that mix and increasing that complexity does have some negative consequences. But overall, and as we've seen today, some of the tooling that's being created to utilize AI that support organizations in these journeys is becoming super advanced and very, very cool. Mm-hmm. So given this kind of the target and the process of this conversation, regarding some of the recent security trends, which cloud services are most effective, and what do you think the greatest risks are to organizations who are adopting them? We'll go with Dick first, because you brought up containerization. I think it's definitely a journey that a lot of organizations are taking. In fact, I had a student who told me during one of my courses last year that nobody uses VMs anymore. And so our course content was wildly out of date. And I was very confused for a little while until I found out that actually he was only 22. It was his first ever job in IT, and he was working for a startup company, and they containerized everything. So, yeah. It's depending on people's perspectives, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I think all services are going to be impacted in this shift. Like, yes, there are going to be some interesting services that are niche and only in the cloud, like in, say, Azure Functions or AWS Lambdas. But the fundamentals of security are the same if it's a computer or if it's a container. Like, we still need to be able to identify things. We still need to be able to assess things. How we go about doing that, or what tools we use to do that, that's going to change. But that's always going to change. Like, we don't just run, the basic Windows antivirus anymore. Like, yeah, you still have that AV component, but there's also an EDR component. Like, we adopt and change as things go on. And I think that's going to be the way for any service within the cloud.
I will say it's time to hang those virtual machines up. You definitely should be switching to containers. There's a lot of things that come up as a surprise. I call it tech debt. Some may call it security debt, but there's things that come up as a surprise when you're managing something like a virtual machine rather than a Docker container, because you're looking at the configuration, which is kind of supplying the operating system, rather than logging in, SSHing, opening an additional part of your attack surface. When it comes to the future, I think the future is a little bit easier to manage than the past, because if we had a data center that was in another physical location, then you had to go in some cases and rewire parts of that data center or server closet. But now we could do that via a Docker container. You could do it through Kubernetes. It's quite nice.
Oh, that's a That's a big statement. I know from personal experience. I got an organization I do a lot of work with, and they have a part of their platform just does not support containers. You cannot containerize it; it just doesn't run, and so they are kind of stuck with virtual machines. But yeah, there are a lot of use cases where we can go down that route. From a security perspective, containers more secure. I don't know, there's an incident response where logs were left inside the container. They were deleted when the container was detected as being compromised. Unfortunately, they didn't understand how the attacker had gained access, and their plan or strategy was to wait for it to be attacked again, which was pretty brave, to be honest. Crystal, what do you think?
As far as containers go, if we're going to keep playing that game, I think sometimes they're trusted too much, especially, I guess, like open source containers. We love Docker Hub, right? And we rely on that tremendously. But there's a lot of bad stuff on Docker Hub too. And I don't think people are scanning containers properly. And you need to. There's so much bad stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that kind of ties into the point, like people
Attackers love containers.
Yeah, they do. I think that gets to the point that big community education thing. Like, yes, containers, they offer a lot of capabilities. I will never argue that point against anyone. But it comes with that trade-off. Like there are things that, like you said, Simone, like you may not be able to do anymore. Maybe that's just bad application code that needs to be written anyway. But you don't know what it is you're buying. You pull something off Docker Hub, you may or may not scan it. Let's say you don't, you become heavily reliant on it. And then, 2-3 years down the line, like you can't get off of that. Like you are wed to that process. And so it's like I view containers as redneck paths. It's close to it, but it's still IaaS. You have a lot of responsibility that you may not have known in advance. So it's just interesting.
But yeah, all these trends we talked about, though, I think every cloud service is going to be impacted. And yeah, containers ain't going anywhere. They're going to be around forever.
They're going to outlive me.
They're mostly impacted by crypto miners, though. I will say that. Containers and crypto miners are best friends.
They go hand in hand.
We'll put that out there.
With containers, we tend to also, along with containers, we're going to introduce into that kind of micro segmentation of compute workload. But we're also introducing micro segmentation then of networks as well, which then increases the complexity. And if you're utilizing tools, and there's nothing wrong with it, but if you're utilizing things like Kubernetes, then your network control system sits within that space and not within the traditional networking space that we have in the cloud. So this is where AI comes really into play, because AI is great at processing huge amounts of data and actually determining trends or traits of those information. So we have heard some horror stories. We've heard some really incredible utilization of AI. Where do organizations start with this? And what is it that they should be aware of as they approach AI as a technology for defensive purposes? I'll go with Ron first.
When Crystal and I were on our session, one of the things that I mentioned was knowing what you're trying to do is very important. Obviously, a security architect, and I would speak to many companies and help them with their SOAR workflows, and they would just say, hey, I want to automate phishing. And I'm like, okay, well, why? Like, is that where you're spending most of your time? They didn't know. They just knew that they bought this tool, this service, because they wanted to automate one thing. I think it's the same thing with AI. AI is essentially automation at its finest, because you get to be a little bit more free flowing in your requests and maybe even in the ways that it responds back, but it's automation. You're putting it into your workflow at some point. I think defining your use case is step number one. You could use AI to help you do that, but I think doing that is going to really help you figure out where is the best place to implement, some of this newer technology or newer security controls. And a lot of the times when we think we've defined our use case, is it documented? Is it communicated? I think just starting there is the gateway to all of the next paths before you can really start anywhere.
Crystal, I'll go with you next on
Sure.
this.
My opinion as far as a good use case for AI is going to be where I came from, in the SOC, in Intel, looking through logs, threat hunting, massive amounts of data, whether, like I said, you're looking at logs or you're reading tons of Intel reports. You have to ingest a ridiculous amount of information, and AI is really good for that. So when you can run intelligence reports through an LLM and it spits out that relevant information that you're looking for, that's incredibly helpful. So you can understand the TTPs of a certain attacker, and get to the bottom of it a lot faster. As far as logs go, if you're threat hunting or you're in the middle of an incident, there's a lot of information that you gather from a SIEM, or when you're trying to go through like malware analysis and things like that. There's a lot of technical data that you have to dig through to find the right information, what identities were involved, what container were involved, like everything that you're looking for to understand where the attacker started, what information they stole. And if you can use an LLM to sift through that for you and receive all of that data in a matter of seconds, that's going to help you tremendously. So if you can implement Gen AI properly in your SOC, then I think that's incredibly valuable in terms of security AI use.
I would agree, but I also have some reservations.
Absolutely. That's very sensitive data. When you're instilling it in an enterprise level and you're feeding it that kind of information, you don't want an attacker to get their hands on that kind of information either. I mean, I wouldn't want them to be able to see the back-end logs of my enterprise either. So you need to make sure you're properly securing it too, for sure.
We're gonna hand this on to onto Dick, but purely on the basis as well that Microsoft have actually integrated quite a lot of AI capability, with a Pure View coming out early last year, and the generative AI services that are coming through at the moment, and the integrations of those into Defender. How do you sort of kind of look at this from an early adopter perspective? With an organization who's moving into the cloud, and what tooling is best for them to use?
So first, I kind of delineate it between is this an AI system or service that I use, or is this an AI service that I own and help build? So kind of the example difference there is Security Copilot. That's something that you can, purchase some SUs and get started. And so on that side, on the things that like I use, I wanted to do two things. Like I wanted to do the dumb things that I hate doing, like writing reports, and I wanted to do the hard things. Like I'm from the Defender for Cloud product group. I know that product like the back of my hand. I don't know that much about our interest suite and how, you just turn the nerd knobs over in Intra to get what it is you want. When did this user sign in? What devices did they sign in from? All that stuff. Well, I don't need to know how to do those things. I can ask Security Copilot, like, hey, how do I find this out? Or find it out for me. When did Bob last sign in? And so there's that aspect. So do those two kind of broad categories of tasks for me. But then we have to look at the Azure AI systems that we own and operate. And I don't mean we, Microsoft, but like, let's say I worked at Contoso. Uh, I may want to set up AI chatbots for my internal employees or even for my customers to ask questions and get a response back. And, the security on that side of the house is there's a lot of uh, corollaries between, like, say, your AI systems and databases or AI systems and data stores with like your typical 3-tier architectures. But there's a lot of different little components that go in. Like, what are my grounding sources, all of my RAG data? How do we protect that and ensure that it doesn't get tampered with? So I don't get things like indirect prompt injection, or how do I deal with prompt injection? And there's all sorts of wonderful little intricacies that come into play there. And then if I'm building an LLM, which, maybe not everyone in the world will do, how do I do that in a secure manner? Like, how do I know that my training data that went in is sanitized and it didn't have something bad on it that'll just, taint me from the get-go? So it's a very broad topic.
It is a very broad topic. And I think it does starts to kind of pose quite a lot of questions about, how we utilize this AI capability, particularly in the field of security from the get-go. So, Crystal, you kind of touched upon this subject, talking about how we utilize it in the SOC, and I think there are so many use cases for it in those places. We've got, Ron sort of talking about how we extend the capability of SOC services by utilizing AI to effectively streamline the process of things like automation, playbook, XDR capabilities. And, we've actually seen some of this working in different situations, environments. What about the risks associated with utilizing those technologies? What are the sort of the main stumbling blocks that you see organizations take when they start taking on these capabilities? I'll let this one open.
I think Ron kind of had the point there. Like, a company will be like, well, I want to do this. I want to use AI. Why? Like, really understand the why behind your things and what your use cases are. Like, we saw, we saw the same things inside of Sentinel with the SOAR capability. Okay, we want to automate all this stuff using logic apps. Okay. Like, what is your business process? I mean, we don't really have one. What are you going to automate? So what do you want the AI system to do for you in all these systems? Getting the summaries, writing reports. Okay, cool. But when we start talking the agentic systems, do you expect to be, you as a human, you as an operator, do you expect to be in the loop or on the loop, whatever the terminology is that we use today for it? Like, what's the flow here? What do you expect? And my recommendation is start slow, start small, and then build out.
One thing I'll add as well is, if you are building out AI or automation, really security use cases as a whole for your organization, be prepared for defensiveness and confrontation. Because as you're defining use cases, people are going to be like, well, we just want to automate something. We just want to use AI towards this use case. And you have to, it's our job as security practitioners to peel back the layers of the onion to see what exists and what may not exist. Like, if I had to give someone a blanket use case to apply AI towards, I would say apply it towards phishing, because it's natural language. LLMs are the hotness right now. It's really easy to apply it towards that type of thing. But before I can make that type of recommendation, generally even, I'd have to understand, what processes do you have in place? Do you have a security policy? Do you have an incident response process? If so, maybe there's a very trying part of your process to where we can relieve some of that pressure with AI. One of the best areas that I could use AI for me personally is reading. I like to watch videos. I like to have things read out to me out loud. So if I could condense my time of reading bits of information, and if it's accurate, then I'm saving myself a lot of time and heartache. But I would apply it towards teams in the same way. Like, what part grinds your gears and what parts is AI effective in, and then ultimately figure out the exact part of the process where AI could be inserted, and then do some testing and then continue to build out from there.
Yeah, so really we're looking at, getting organizations to have some sort of security policy in place before they jump down the AI rabbit hole. or have a good plan in place on how to adopt it, rather than just the sort of full blind running forwards with the hands tied behind the back situation that actually we do see on a considerable amount, particularly from an architecture perspective. We have this quite a lot.
It feels better that way to just run and go with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that the outcomes do seem to be on the sort of negative side when it comes to blindly trusting or jumping into new technologies, especially with like a lot of the new capabilities that are coming out at the moment as well. So you mentioned this a little bit, actually, Dick. You sort of jumped into agentic services. How and can or should they be used? Are they great for things like decision making? Are they time savers? And how reliant should we be on that technology as it currently stands?
So my personal opinion, time savers. They should not do decision making. I personally want humans in the loop. And I don't just say that because I don't trust large language models and AI systems and all that stuff. No, like, yes, that is a problem. Yes, that will get better as time evolves. But this is my business. This is my company. If the LLM makes a mistake or something goes wrong, it may get booted off. We may stop using it as a company, but my job's on the line. So I'm the one responsible. I want humans engaged. I want humans involved on this. And there's that responsibility level or aspect, but also, I don't want to call it accountability, but I don't want to dumb us down. Like, I want AI systems to enhance us and make us better. But if I start and just throw all of the AI systems at my junior engineer or my junior security analyst and say, this is the only thing you're going to use, and you will trust it blindly and just use it, that's not going to make them smarter. Like, they're not going to be able to move up into that senior analyst role or, the security architect role. So there's that aspect.
Sounds a lot like Virus Total, how a lot of security operations, like early SOC team members, they'll use Virus Total. It's the smoking gun. If Virus Total says it's bad, it's bad,
Yep. I'm with you, Dick. I think, to your point, it's great for skilling up. It is a really good resource for junior analysts, because I use an old friend, my senior mentor from when I used to work in a skiff, Dave, and I would ask him for help, right? When I didn't know the answer to a question, and I would ask him to help me out. And that's the equivalent to AI for me now, because he would just spit out those answers. So you can ask an LLM for an answer, and there you go. You have your answer right away. So it's kind of like having a security analyst, but you don't have to constantly bother your senior anymore. You can use the AI first and then bother your senior. Hey, I got this answer. Is this right? Yeah. Rather than, can you give me all the answers? So I think it's great for skilling up, but no, I wouldn't rely on it 110% all the time. I don't think we'll get there either. I do also appreciate having humans in the loop, but it does make us faster. And like you said too, I don't know everything about everything. So I use it to ask questions so I can learn more about all kinds of different stuff. I don't know everything about cloud security. I know some things, and I ask questions of people and of AI when I need to.
This one's a tough one for me because on one hand, there hasn't been someone that I looked up to, like a mentor, a trusted advisor, that won't answer any question. They'll answer anything. If I go to my most trusted advisors, they will do their best to answer any question. They're going to give all the context they have about the situation that I present to them, and they're going to give me an answer. And I would say it's the same for AI. AI is going to take the context that you have, and it's going to give you an answer. Now, whether it's right or not is just probably about as accurate as my trusted advisors. They're working off of the context that I give them. The more context I give them about the scenario, the better of a chance they have at being right. And I think it's the same thing with AI. A lot of the times when it's wrong, it's due to the context that we're providing. I think sometimes it just hallucinate and make things up. But most of the time, for my use cases specifically, it comes down to the level of context. There's some great quotes out there, one of them being, the quality of your life comes down to the quality of your questions. I think it's the same thing when using AI and looking at, going back to what you were asking about, risk with AI. I think the risk of AI comes down to the quality of our questions, but also the quality of our plans too.
I love
So on that basis, yeah, so on that basis, then we are leveling our dependency on AI based upon the training models that were designed by humans and then the way we ask the questions.
It all circles back around to human error, I see.
It does.
Everything comes back around to human error. Human error is inevitable in security.
Okay, so what about if we abstract this slightly from the technical roles and actually take the agentic AI systems into more of a strategic function, and we ask it to start making decisions about how we approach security, but from a policy perspective or a governance and compliance perspective, how can it help organizations in that case?
There's a new protocol called Model Context Protocol. I look at this as the next generation of APIs. This technology is really cool. I've used a lot of very interesting applications, Microsoft Copilot, Cursor, Windsurf, all of these agentic coding platforms. They're also really good at cybersecurity. You could put a lot of information in markdown files and then start to chat with those files, kind of like you do in a Slack message. At this file, let me get some context and let me get some information. When I look at the agentic future, it's looking so bright because of the advent of LangChain. That was a revolutionary piece of technology. But number two, I think MCP, it just was released, I think in November, and it's now starting to capture a lot of hype and attention. I've been building a lot of my tools that I've developed and putting MCP on top. So I can now ask my database questions and then go into another tool like Slack and then ask it questions. And it's looking at the context from Slack, the context from my database, and pairing those two together because of the Model Context Protocol. I think that the agentic systems that we thought we were going to see in 2025 are going to be a lot different than the ones that we actually see, especially due to this new advent of MCP.
Yeah, so MCP, super interesting, especially when context is a very loaded word. Like, it's simple to say, simple to kind of quickly define in your head as a human. But for these AI systems, it's massively important. And yeah, it's really great. Will it, take actions based off policies in your corporate environment? So uh, let's say we had a very kind of ambiguous statement. We want to reduce the number of inbound inbound threats by X%. Do I think that in the very near future that some AI system will be able to take just that simple statement and then go, okay, well, in order to achieve this, we need to do X, Y, and Z to our AWS and our Azure environments? No, like that's too much advanced thinking that I don't think that we'll see AI systems tackle immediately. Uh, Maybe by the time I'm, retiring, but no.
Oh, you're breaking my heart. You're breaking my heart, Dick.
I mean, it is there is promise, but it's just there's a lot of ambiguity in how these things are interpreted, and I just don't see it being translated near term. But I've been wrong before.
Maybe Ron and Hacker Valley can prove us wrong this year or next.
Like I said, I've been wrong before. It's gonna happen.
So I got a chance to see Cystic Sage. I also have seen Copilot all over, the internet and especially LinkedIn. And when I look at these two tools, I look at them as game changers, especially when you bring in something like MCP, because I don't know a tenth of the information about these cloud providers. Like if I use Microsoft, AWS, Google, the amount of context I have about the suite of products is so limited, and so is my time. You know, everybody wants time with Slack and Zoom meetings. Our time is so limited. So I look at having these co-pilots, especially these agentic chat systems. If you can at least prepare something for me so I could, you know, create a better policy or strategy or use cases. You know, I look at those types of things as infinitely helpful, because the time that I used to spend on things like Reddit or Stack Overflow was, it was an abundance, and the output that I would get from it was also very small. But with new LLM based agentic systems, I think we're able to get a lot more. Maybe they can't do everything for us. Like I want someday, I would love to retire and just relax, but I think that they could at least give us a lot of the information and save us the heartache of the research.
I think it does a lot of the hard work. I'll give you an example. I'm currently in the process of drafting a blog to go on our little tech community page, talking about how can we customize the rules and tool chains that Microsoft DevOps uses when it scans something. And so I went into just Word, like this is Word Copilot or M365 Copilot, whatever we call it. And it was like, hey, I want you to write me a blog on that topic I just discussed, you know, in the style of a typical Microsoft security blog, and just let it run. And I was alarmed because it used the exact structure that it is we use, you know, that we tend to use on our blogs. It populated a lot of the information. Did it get things wrong? Yes. But that was about 80% of the work. You know, so
Right.
now it's just like, great, you know, read through the blog, you know, sanity checking every line. Okay, this needs to change. That's inaccurate. That was for an old version, which gets into an interesting point. When were these large language models trained? Because it was, you know, like I know it because I've helped write the documentation for some of these things. It's like that's going off of a docs page that we wrote 5 years ago. It's not accurate anymore. And so
Yep.
that's why it's going this direction. At least that's what I'm, you know, using a very educated guess on. Um, so I mean, it's interesting. It has places, but that next level, I just don't see it right now coming across that next level of thought.
I think a lot of our audience agree. There's some really interesting comments going on in the chat at the moment. There's one that said, like, just to be sure that it's not your neck in the loop, just say, you know, are you 100% reliant on these AI services, and are you going to put your job on the line for it? Others agreeing here with Ron, saying, you know, yeah, just give it time. It's going to get there. We're still very early days with a lot of this technology. One of my favorite ones. Do you think AI systems will respond with just turn off your machine? I mean, we have actually had that situation. We asked a Gen AI tool to write us a policy that would protect all of the AWS infrastructure, and it literally wrote "deny everything everywhere," and that was it. I was like, well, you know, it's kind of
Somebody
right.
needs to turn the temperature on that down.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we got to. It's again a way that we interact and we interface with these. Okay, we're more or less out of time. I'd love to continue this, and I think everybody in our chat channel would love for us to go on longer. Unfortunately, we are slightly well running out of time very quickly. So I just want to give you an opportunity to wrap up sort of the day and tell us what you think, where things are going to go, what your sort of expectations are for the next 6 months, year, 2 years, etc. And Crystal, I'm going to go with you first.
I'm going to wrap up from my report that just came out. I'm seeing super positive things in cloud security. I think as cloud defenders, we have made amazing progress over the last year, over the last couple of years. We know what we need to do to be proactive with our security processes. We understand threat detection and response. We are doing more of these automated response actions. we're getting there. I promise you, we are doing a better job, even though sometimes day to day, when you're sitting there in your seat, it doesn't feel like it when you have those 200,000 vulnerabilities in your backlog, or there's just alerts going off left and right, and it's, you know, Christmas break or 4th of July and you're on call. I get it. But we are doing a really good job. I have seen positive changes in cloud security. And I think we are starting to best attackers. We are getting faster with our detection and response. Identities are still a struggle, but we'll get there. So yeah, I just want to say good job to everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to keep coming back and keep doing your thing because you guys are all doing great. Good job.
Thanks, Crystal. Much appreciated. Rob?
Echoing what Crystal said, I love the fact that this was one of the first reports that I saw, that I've seen really over the course of my career, where it's like showing the upward trend of good progress. So big shout outs to SysDig for putting that report together, also for bringing me, and also a big shout out to everyone for attending this session and the sessions today, because the better that you become at your craft, the better that we all become together. I was once on the other end watching SANS videos relentlessly, and you know, having the opportunity to now be on the stage and also speak to many of you is a true delight and blessing. So wanted to say thank you for spending some time with us on top of that.
That's
Brilliant.
a funny point.
Thanks.
I was looking for the SANS shirt that I got. I think it would have been about 12 years ago from the first SANS event I went to in Alexandria, Virginia. And yeah, it's y'all are a great organization, provide a lot of learning for the people that are on here. Keep doing what you do. Like the more you the more you do, the more we learn, by we, I mean providers of some piece of technology. The more issues you raise, the better we get. And it's really great.
Well, I'd love to take this opportunity to thank you all for participating in this panel, and a huge thank you to all of our sponsors who've actually made this sort of day happen: Wiz, Microsoft, Tenable, Palo Alto, SysDig, Armo, and OpsWatt. You've been absolutely fantastic. We couldn't produce this content and such an engaging amount of discussion without your help. So really appreciate that. And a big thank you to everybody who's joined us today. I think we had over 1,200 people online at one point this afternoon. So that was absolutely fantastic. I know people are coming in from all over the world and different time zones, etc. But it's really good to hear that, you know, we do have this kind of collective agreement that we are on this upwards trajectory of improving cybersecurity, particularly inside cloud environments. I myself, being cloud architect and teaching cloud architecture to a couple of hundred people a year as part of the SANS programs, really does give me a lot of satisfaction to see that we are making these improvements. Things are getting better. The cloud providers are definitely starting to make our lives a little bit easier when they consistently bring out new technologies, new capabilities, and then plus with third-party companies then binding onto those and improving that posture, improving visibility, and just giving us much more of an insight and the ability to respond to the kind of attacks that we're seeing. Just makes everybody's life a little bit easier and a little bit safer. SANS actually have a cloud security questionnaire that's been posted just recently. It's part of our Cloud Exchange program, and will be all the results will be collected later this year. So there's a huge questionnaire online. I'm sure one of our event staff will post a link to it in the Slack channel. If you do want to engage with that, the results will be posted, and there'll be a discussion about it with myself and the author later this year, August, mid-August, I think it is, where we'll review all of those. But for now, that's it from me. So thank you for listening. Thank you to everybody, and especially my panelists this afternoon. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and your week. Thanks very much for listening. Bye-bye.